situations where I need to apologize. So, okay, I don't feel as bad. Okay.
Well, I'm glad that nobody, I'm glad that nobody heard it.
Right, thank you.
Because if you said
My
you heard
apologies.
it, then we'd be like,
This is my humbling experience for the week. Okay, absolute value is the distance from 0. This should have been the same. I don't know why it was a different video.
It did
What?
last year. I saw it
No,
last
let
year.
me.
I don't understand.
Let me look. Just a second. I think it was. Let me pull it up again.
I think it's safe too.
If I open this is the link video.
Hey guys, does this day sound familiar? You go to a confusing lecture, you ask for help.
Too bad. Nope, that's the wrong one. This is the link I gave you.
Yeah.
So it was.
No, it's different.
Okay, so what happened is I put this link up. This link was right. This link was right. But when it played and then it skipped to another video. So the link I gave you was wrong. So this is the one we should watch. Okay, so watch this and then try to answer the questions. Sorry. I accept that. That was my issue.
You should keep us on.
Okay, so try to answer it from this video. That will be helpful.
Remember that when you're working with absolute value and trying to solve equations, you have to keep in mind what absolute value means. And what absolute value means is distance away from 0. So like this is...
See why I was like, why did you not get it? So absolute value is what? Distance from 0. It's easier when I give you the right.
Help you remember the concept.
Yeah.
If the absolute value of x equals 5, what that means is that x is whatever number is 5 away from 0. So I drew a little picture. Here's 0. X could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this way. So x could equal to 5. And my other answer comes from when I move 5 in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. X equals negative 5. Most of the time, you're going to have two answers like that. So you have to be aware when you're solving absolute value equations that you're probably going to have two answers.
Okay, so that was the second question. What was the second question? How many answers will you get?
2.
2. And why will you get 2? Yeah, 2 answers have the same distance from 0. What 2 numbers have a distance of 5 from 0? 5, negative 5. Good. I'm like, why you guys just... Okay. Last
The way you
question.
solve the problems is that the first thing you do is do the mathematical solving techniques that isolates the absolute value piece. You want to get that absolute value piece all by itself before you do any solving equations. The next thing you want to keep in mind is when you get to the bottom of your problem, you're trying to figure out how many answers you have, there's a couple little secrets you can remind yourself of. Most of the time, you're going to get 2 answers. However, if you have something where your absolute value blah 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 is equal to 0, that means you're only going to have 1 solution. And also, if you get something where your absolute value blah 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 is equal to some negative value, negative, I'm just going to say negative 100, I made that up, could be negative anything, that means you're going to have no solution. Because no number could be a negative distance away from 0. Remember, absolute value means distance away from 0. And it doesn't make sense to have a negative distance. And that's why
that should help make sense. So last question. How can I get 1 solution? Absolute value equal to 0, because that means that only 1 number has a distance of 0 from 0. And then how do I get no solution? Yeah, absolute value equal to a negative. The absolute value has to be by itself because I cannot have a negative distance. That makes me feel better. Okay. Once again, I apologize. Okay, let's look at some examples. The other 2 videos were fine. So let's look at a couple examples. So, example 2. Solve each equation, then graph the solution set. So what you want to do first, like she said, you want to isolate the absolute value. So as I look at A, the absolute value is by itself. What I mean by that is there are no numbers outside the absolute value. So the absolute value has to be by itself. There's nothing outside of it. Once it's by itself, we can split it into my 2 equations. Now, as I look at this, what do you guys notice about example 2a? She just talked about it. The absolute value is equal to what?
Negative.
Can the absolute value be equal to a negative number? No, so it's no solution. So check for that. However, the absolute value has to be alone. Just because it's equal to a negative, you have to make sure there's no other numbers with outside the absolute value symbol.
What if there is?
Then get the absolute value by itself and then see if it's still equal to a negative. We'll do an example like it. Okay, example 2. The absolute value is alone. There's nothing outside the absolute value. It's already isolated. So we are going to go ahead and solve this. Now this is like the video 2. To solve this, since the absolute value is equal to the distance from 0, we want to ask myself, what two numbers have a distance of 8 from 0? What two numbers have a distance of 8 from 0?
Negative 8 and a positive.
Negative 8 and positive 8. So to set up my two equations, since what it's saying is the absolute value equals 8, the distance from 0 is 8, I know that the two numbers that has a distance of 8 from 0 is negative 8 and 8. So you lose your absolute value symbol, you set it equal to a negative 8, and you set it equal to a positive 8. Absolute value, to lose the absolute value, you have to set it equal to a negative and a positive. That's how you lose the absolute value. Now, let's solve these two. These are two equations we know how to solve from last week. Add 4 to both sides. 2t equals with negative 8 plus 4. Negative 4. So once you split it up, the equations aren't hard. You know how to do it. Divide by 2. T equals negative 4 divided by 2. Okay. And then my next equation. Add 4. Add 4. 2t equals 12. Divide by 2, t equals 6. So you will usually get two answers to absolute value unless it's equal to 0. Now if I want to graph this solution set, we're just going to draw a graph, a line graph, and we're just going to plot those 2 points on there. So we're going to have a point at negative 2 and we're going to have a point at 6. You don't need to draw all the lines between it, that's fine. Just put a dash, make sure they're in order. Negative 2 comes before 6. And you're just going to put filled in circles. So that represents it being equal to negative 2 and 6. That's it. So the number line is not terribly hard. It's just plotting it on the number line. Okay. Any questions on that one? The big thing is you get to lose the absolute value, you have to set it equal to a positive and set it equal to negative. Okay, let's look at example, a harder one. Now as I look at this one, top of the next page, what do I notice about this equation? Yeah, the absolute value is not alone. There's the 2 with it, and there's the negative 3 with it. Sheldon. There's a 2 outside the absolute value, there's a negative 3 outside the absolute value. So, as I look at this, to isolate the absolute value, you're going to use the same process we did when we were solving an equation. So, do I get rid of the 2 or the negative 3 first? Negative 3. So you use the same techniques we used with solving equations. Get rid of the outside one first, so add 3 to both sides. 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1 equals 4. You cannot distribute the 2. This is absolute value, not parentheses, so don't try to distribute the 2. Is the absolute value alone yet? No. What do I do to get the absolute value alone? What do I do to get rid of the 2? Divide both sides by 2. It's the same idea that we use with solving normal equations. Do not lose the absolute value. I still have the absolute value of x minus 1 equal to 2. Don't forget your absolute value sign. You don't lose the absolute value. The only way you lose the absolute value is when you split it into your two equations. Up to that point, you have to keep it there.
Some of them might have a question when you use the order of operations. Why don't you do the divide or the divide it before you?
Because we're not actually evaluating, we're trying to solve, so we're working backwards. to try to find x.
Okay, I
Yes.
thought you
Yeah.
might have that.
Yeah, but it's the same idea as when we did equations. Okay, so now we want to get the absolute value, get rid of the absolute value. So I split it into my two equations. So what two equations, absolute value is equal to 2, what two equations have a distance of 2 from 0? X minus 1 equal to a negative 2, x minus 1 equal to a positive 2. So to lose your absolute value, you said equal to a negative and positive, because negative 2 and 2 have a distance of 2 from 0. Now you have two equations you know how to solve. Add 1. So x equals, what's negative 2 plus 1? Negative 1. Add 2, x equals 3. And it says to graph it on a number line, so just do a graph. It doesn't need to be anything spectacular. Put a mark at negative 1, put a mark at 3, and then just put dots. So my two solutions are negative 1 and 3. The only thing we're adding is the splitting it up into two equations. Guys, seriously, I'm in the middle of talking. Well, if you're sorry, you wouldn't keep doing it. Okay, any questions on that one? Okay, let's look at example 3, story problem. The average January temperature in a northern Canadian city is 1 degree Fahrenheit. The actual January temperature for that city may be about 5 degrees warmer or colder. Write and solve an equation to find the maximum and minimum temperatures. It's a story problem. So what am I looking for? Okay, what are they asking for?
An equation.
Okay, so I need an equation. Max and min temperature. So whatever they're looking for is going to be my variable. So T is going to represent my temperature. Okay, the January temperature in northern Canadian city is 1 degree Fahrenheit. The actual January temperature for that city may be about 5 degrees warmer or colder. So that means that I may be 5 degrees higher than 1 degree or 5 degrees lower than 1 degree. So you can kind of think about it and think what my answer should kind of look like. But what we're going to look at is we're going to take the absolute value and we're going to set it equal to 5. And we're going to set it equal to 5 because if we think about it, that is the distance away from 1 that my temperature may be. It may be 5 above it, it may be 5 below it. So that is the distance from 1 that my temperature can be. So that's why the absolute value is equal to 5, because that's the distance away from 1. Now, my starting value is 1. So this is going to be T minus 1. Whenever you put this starting value in there, it's always puts in as an opposite. So if my starting value is positive 1, inside the absolute value is going to be T minus 1. And I want to know the maximum and minimum temperature I can have. So we're going to solve this and find T. So absolute value, how do I lose the absolute value? T minus 1 equals 5, and?
Add the 1 to 5.
Well, what's the other equation?
T minus 1 equals negative.
Yeah, absolute value. The distance from 0, or the distance from 1 in this case, is 5. So we need to set it equal to a negative and positive 5. So what two numbers have a distance of 5 from 1? And then solve these equations. Add 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. So 6 degrees. So make sure you label it. 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Add 1 on the other equation. T equals negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Think about it in your head. These make sense. If I can have a maximum 5 degrees higher than 1, that's 6. My minimum would be 5 degrees lower than 1, negative 4. Okay. Any questions on that? Yes?
So make a graph.
It doesn't say graph, so you don't need to worry about it. Just find the max and min temperature. Okay, now let's look at example 4. Example 4 is a little different. I give you the graph. I want you to write the equation. involving an absolute value. Absolute value is the distance from a number. So what you need to do first with example 4, these are a little tricky. What you need to do first, if you want to put it in the middle, kind of number step 1, find the middle number. Find the middle number. Because I need to know what number has the same distance, or what number are those 2 points the same distance from. So I need to find the middle number. So as I look at my 2 points, I have -4. It's hard to read. I have -4 and 6. So I need to think, the first thing, what is going to be in the middle number, because they have to have the same distance from a number. So what number is the middle number between -4 and 6? 1. So my number is 1. So find the middle number. The middle number between -4 and 6 is 1. So that is the number that we're going to have that -4 and 6 have the same distance from. Okay? Now as I set it up, we have the absolute value equal to the distance. The absolute value is always the distance from something. So what is the absolute value going to be equal to?
1.
Nope. Absolute value is equal to the distance. 5. What is the distance that -4 and 6 are from 1? 5. So the absolute value is equal to 5. So absolute value is always equal to a distance. So what is the distance that -4 and 6 are from 1? The distance is 5. The absolute value equals 5. Now, whatever your middle number is goes in here, and it's always the opposite. So if it's a +1 is my middle number, then you put y minus 1. So find the distance first. That's what the absolute value is equal to. And then whatever your middle number is, the opposite goes in there. And write an equation involving absolute value. That's it. I already did it. So step 1, find the middle number. Step 2, find the distance. If you want to write that down, that's fine. Find the distance. So they're not necessarily take a lot of work. You just kind of have to think about it. So find the middle number, and then look at what is the distance between the middle number and the other 2 numbers. Let's look at the next one. 17 and 27. So what is the middle number between 17 and 27?
22.
Okay, easy way to find it. The distance is 10 between them, so split it in half. So 22, 5 and 5. So right here is my middle, 22 is my middle number. Find your middle number. As I set my absolute value equation up, the absolute value is going to be equal to 5. Absolute value is the distance. So the absolute value is equal to the distance that 27 and 17 are from 22, which is 5. And then what's going to go in your parenthesis? You could use y, you could use t, it doesn't matter. X doesn't matter. Minus 22. Whatever is your middle number goes in there, and it's the opposite. So see, minus 22 is equal to 5. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, besides me totally botching the first
If your middle
one.
number was negative, it won't ever be a negative. will
It could be. If your middle number was -6, then you would just put t plus 6 in there.
Plus the
Yeah.
opposite.
Yep. Okay, homework. If you didn't look at it earlier, is page 106.
Are we getting any papers back today?
Huh?
Are we getting any papers back today?
Maybe I need to pass it back. Remind me to do it. Page 106, 13 through 41 odd, 32 and 40. Add a couple evens in there. Okay, I will let you listen to music because I still feel bad that I put the wrong video up.
And as you're working through these,